I was refilling the ice bucket at Thanksgiving when I heard my husband on the back porch, laughing into his phone. "She'll never notice, she's too busy counting pills to count money, trust me." He did not know I was standing 3 feet away, holding a plastic pitcher, listening to him plot the dismantling of our shared accounts with a woman whose voice I could hear faintly through the speaker, breathy and encouraging. If you've ever felt invisible in your own marriage, keep listening, because what my husband didn't know cost him everything. I had been a pharmacist for 16 years. I understood systems, interactions, half-lives. I understood that some substances were incompatible, that mixing the wrong compounds could cause reactions ranging from mild to catastrophic. I understood dosage and toxicity and the fine line between medicine and poison. I had spent my career reading prescriptions written in doctors' illegible handwriting, catching errors that could have killed people, counseling patients on side effects they needed to watch for. I knew how to pay attention to details other people missed. I knew how to notice what did not belong. My husband's name was Scott. We had been married for 9 years. He worked in commercial insurance, a field that seemed designed to be as boring as possible: risk assessment, actuarial tables, policy underwriting. He wore khakis and button-downs to an office park on the edge of Fargo, came home smelling like coffee and fluorescent lighting, and complained about spreadsheets over dinner. When we met, I had been charmed by his stability, his predictability, the way he seemed like solid ground after a string of relationships that had felt like quicksand. He was safe. He was reliable. He was the kind of man who balanced his checkbook and changed the oil in his car on schedule. We lived in a modest 2-story house in a neighborhood where people mowed their lawns on Saturday mornings and waved to each other from driveways. We had a joint checking account for household expenses and separate accounts for our individual spending. We split the mortgage and utilities down the middle. We took turns cooking dinner. We had a cat named Felicity and a vegetable garden that produced more zucchini than any 2 people could reasonably consume. From the outside, we looked like a functional, unremarkable marriage. From the outside, everything looked fine. The first sign came in September, 4 months before Thanksgiving. I was reviewing our joint account statement, a habit I had developed early in our marriage, the same meticulous attention I brought to prescription verification, and I noticed a transfer I did not recognize. $1,500, moved from our joint account to Scott's personal account, with a memo line that said reimbursement. I asked him about it that evening. He barely looked up from his laptop. He said he had covered some work expenses on his personal card and was paying himself back. He said it was in the budget. He said I worried too much about money. I let it go. I told myself he was right, that I was being overly cautious, that marriage required a certain amount of trust. But I also started watching more carefully. I checked the account every week instead of every month. I noticed more transfers. 500 here, 800 there, always labeled reimbursement or adjustment or some other vague term that explained nothing. Over the course of 2 months, nearly $6,000 moved from our joint account into Scott's personal account. I asked him about it again in early November. This time, his response was sharper. He said I was being controlling. He said he made more money than I did, which was true. His salary was about 15% higher than mine, and that he was entitled to manage finances as he saw fit. He said if I did not trust him, maybe we had bigger problems than account transfers. The argument ended with him leaving the house for 2 hours and coming back acting as though nothing had happened. I did not bring it up again. But I also did not stop watching. Thanksgiving was at our house that year. My parents, Scott's mother, his younger sister Emma, and her husband. I spent the morning cooking: turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, the same menu I made every year. Scott stayed in the living room, watching football, occasionally coming into the kitchen to open another beer. By the time everyone arrived at 2, I had been on my feet for 6 hours and Scott had contributed nothing except commentary on how the Patriots' offensive line was underperforming. Dinner was fine. Conversation was polite. Scott's mother asked when we were going to give her grandchildren. Scott laughed and said we were still enjoying being selfish. My mother asked about my work. I told her about the new pharmacy software we were implementing, about the challenges of digitizing patient records while maintaining privacy. Emma talked about her new job in marketing. Her husband talked about the deck he was building. It was the kind of meal where everyone performed their roles competently and no one said anything that mattered. After dinner, I started clearing plates. Scott's mother insisted on helping, which meant she followed me into the kitchen and critiqued my dish-loading technique while I tried not to snap at her. I needed more ice for the drinks. The ice maker in our refrigerator had broken the previous week, so we were using bagged ice from the freezer in the garage. I grabbed the plastic pitcher and went through the mudroom, into the garage, and that was when I heard Scott's voice. He was on the back porch, just on the other side of the garage wall. The window was open, I had cracked it earlier to let out the smell of garbage, and his voice carried clearly in the cold November air. He was laughing, that particular laugh he used when he was trying to impress someone, a little louder than necessary, a little too pleased with himself. "I'm telling you, it's foolproof," he said. "She checks the account, sure, but she doesn't know about the other one. And even if she noticed the transfers, I just tell her it's work reimbursement. She's too busy counting pills to count money, trust me." There was a pause. I stood frozen, the empty pitcher in my hand, cold air pouring through the window. A woman's voice came through the phone, faint but audible. I could not make out words, just tone, light, flirtatious, encouraging. Scott laughed again. "Yeah, by spring we'll have enough. I'm moving about $2,000 a month right now, keeping it steady so it doesn't look suspicious." She has no idea. Honestly, she's so focused on work, she barely notices I exist anymore. Makes it easier. Another pause. Then, I know. I miss you too. Just a few more months and we can stop sneaking around. Once the money's in place, I'll file and we'll be set. My hand tightened on the pitcher. The plastic cracked slightly under the pressure. I did not move. I did not breathe. I stood there and listened to my husband plot my financial ruin with a woman whose name I did not know, whose face I had never seen, whose existence I had not suspected until 30 seconds ago. He said a few more things, something about a trip they were planning, something about a restaurant reservation, and then he ended the call. I heard his footsteps on the porch, heading toward the back door. I moved quickly, silently, back into the kitchen through the interior door. By the time he came inside, I was at the sink, rinsing a serving dish, my face composed. "Ice?" My mother called from the dining room. "Coming," I said. My voice sounded normal. I was surprised by that. I went back to the garage, filled the pitcher with ice, brought it to the table. I refilled drinks. I smiled. I asked if anyone wanted more pie. I performed normalcy while my mind worked through what I had just heard, cataloging details the way I catalog drug interactions, mechanism, effect, contraindications. Scott was stealing from our joint account. He had a second account I did not know about. He was planning to divorce me. He had a woman, a girlfriend, a mistress, whatever term applied, who was complicit in the theft. He believed I was too distracted, too naive, too focused on my work to notice. He was wrong about that last part. A pharmacist learns early that errors kill people. You learn to double-check everything. You learn to trust nothing at face value. You learn that the most dangerous mistakes are the ones that look legitimate on the surface, the prescription with the right patient name but the wrong dosage, the insurance approval that covers the brand name but not the generic, the allergy notation buried 3 pages deep in a medical history. You learn to look closer. You learn to verify. I had been verifying our finances for months. I had documentation of every transfer, every suspicious memo line, every dollar that had moved out of our joint account into his personal account. I had spreadsheets. I had screenshots. I had dates and amounts and patterns. I had not known what I was documenting, had not understood the full picture. But I had the data. After everyone left, I told Scott I had a headache and went to bed early. I did not have a headache. I had clarity. I lay in the dark and listened to him move around downstairs, the television turning on, the sound of a beer being opened, his footsteps eventually climbing the stairs to the guest room where he had been sleeping for the past month, claiming his snoring was keeping me awake. I had accepted that explanation. I had accepted so many explanations. I waited until I heard his door close. Then I got up, went to the home office, and logged into our joint account. I downloaded 6 months of statements. I created a new folder on my laptop, password protected, and saved everything there. Then I opened Scott's desk drawer, the one he thought was locked but which I had been able to open for years with a letter opener. Inside were manila folders, organized and labeled in his meticulous handwriting. One folder was labeled personal banking. Inside were statements for an account at a different bank, an account in only his name, an account that currently held $14,000. The deposits matched the transfers from our joint account almost exactly. There were also ATM withdrawals, small amounts, $40 or $60 at a time, always on Thursdays. I photographed every page with my phone. Another folder was labeled travel. Inside were printed confirmations for hotel reservations, Chicago in October, Minneapolis in September, Sioux Falls in August. All the trips he had told me were work conferences. All booked as double occupancy. I photographed those too. A third folder, unlabeled, contained printed emails. I skimmed them quickly. They were love letters, explicit and detailed, between Scott and someone named Jenna Kiernan. I did not read them closely. I did not need to. I photographed them and put everything back exactly as I had found it. I went back to bed. I lay in the dark and thought about half-lives, about how long it takes for something toxic to leave your system. I thought about dosage and accumulation and the point at which exposure becomes lethal. I thought about my marriage and realized it had been poisoning me slowly for longer than I had understood. I did not cry. I calculated. The next morning, Scott left for work before I woke up. I had the day off. I made coffee, fed the cat, and sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I opened the folder where I had saved the financial records. I reviewed everything methodically, the joint account statements, the photographs of Scott's secret account, the pattern of transfers. $14,000 over 5 months. An average of $2,800 per month. If he had been doing this longer than I had been watching, the total could be significantly higher. I thought about the phrase he had used on the phone, by spring we'll have enough. Enough for what? A down payment on a new place? An emergency fund for when he left? Enough to support himself and Jenna while the divorce dragged through the courts? I thought about what I had that Scott did not know about. 3 years ago, my grandmother had passed away. She had been a careful woman, a child of the Depression who saved everything and trusted nothing. She left me $47,000 in a trust, managed by her attorney, with instructions that it be transferred to me in full on my 35th birthday. I had turned 35 8 months ago. The money had been sitting in an investment account at a firm in Minneapolis ever since. I had not told Scott about it. Not because I was hiding it, exactly, but because it had felt like mine in a way our joint account never had. My grandmother's gift. My safety net. My choice. That money was worth, as of this morning's balance, $51,000. Scott did not know it existed. I also had a retirement account through the pharmacy, untouched except for automatic contributions. It held $63,000. Scott knew about that account in theory, but he had never asked about the balance, had never looked at a statement. And I had this house. Scott believed the house was his because his name was on the mortgage. But both our names were on the deed. In North Dakota, a community property state, anything acquired during a marriage was jointly owned regardless of whose name was on the loan. Scott either did not know that or had chosen to ignore it. I was not as vulnerable as he thought I was. I was not as oblivious as he assumed. I had resources he had not accounted for. The question was what to do with them. I could confront him. I could show him the photographs, demand an explanation, scream and cry and make him admit what he had done. But confrontation would give him time to hide more, to move money I had not found yet, to prepare. Confrontation was satisfying in the moment but often costly in the aftermath. I could file for divorce first. Surprise him with papers, seize the upper hand, force him to react instead of act. But filing meant lawyers and fees and a process that could take months, during which Scott could continue draining accounts, racking up debt in my name, making my life harder out of spite. Or I could do what I did at work when I found an error, document everything, follow the protocol, and take action only when I had enough evidence to be certain of the outcome. I decided on the third option. I called a lawyer that afternoon. Her name was Meredith Huang. I had found her through an online search, filtering for family law attorneys in Fargo with good reviews and experience in asset protection. Her office was in a restored building downtown, all exposed brick and tall windows. She met with me the same day, squeezing me in during her lunch hour. I brought my laptop. I showed her the account statements, the photographs of Scott's secret account, the hotel reservations, the emails. She reviewed everything in silence, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. When she finished, she looked up at me. "How do you feel?" she asked. It was an unexpected question. I thought about it. "Angry," I said. "But calm." She nodded. "Good. Anger is useful if you can control it. Calm is better." She tapped her pen against the legal pad. "You have excellent documentation. This is financial misconduct, dissipation of marital assets. In a divorce, the court will take that into account when dividing property. He'll likely have to reimburse the joint account or have his share of other assets reduced to compensate." "What do I need to do?" I asked. "First, stop contributing to the joint account. Open a new account in your name only and have your paycheck deposited there. Second, change your passwords, bank accounts, email, everything. He may already have access to more than you realize. Third, do not tell him you know. Not yet. Let him keep doing what he's doing. The more he takes, the worse it looks for him. Fourth, gather more evidence if you can. Phone records, credit card statements, anything that establishes a timeline and a pattern. And then? Then we file. We ask for an immediate restraining order on all joint accounts, freezing them so he can't take anything else. We ask for a forensic accountant to review all marital assets. And we present this evidence to show he's been acting in bad faith. It won't be pleasant, but you'll be in a much stronger position than he expects." I hired her on the spot. Over the next 6 weeks, I followed Meredith's instructions exactly. I opened a new bank account and rerouted my paycheck. I changed every password I had. I installed a credit monitoring service to make sure Scott had not opened accounts in my name. I checked our joint account daily, watching the balance decrease as Scott continued his steady theft. 2000 in early December, another 1800 right before Christmas. I did not confront him. I did not change my behavior. I came home from work, made dinner, asked about his day. I was polite and distant, the same polite distance we had been practicing for months. If he noticed anything different, he did not mention it. He was too focused on his own plans to notice mine. Christmas was awkward. We exchanged gifts that felt like obligations, a sweater for him, a stand mixer for me. We went to his mother's house for dinner. We smiled in photos. We pretended. In early January, Meredith told me we had enough. She drafted the divorce petition, the motion to freeze joint accounts, and the request for a forensic accountant. She scheduled everything to be filed and served simultaneously, papers delivered to Scott at his office on a Tuesday morning while I was at work, so I would not have to see his face when he realized what was happening. The day it happened, I worked my regular shift at the pharmacy. I filled prescriptions, counseled patients, answered questions about insurance copays and generic substitutions. I was restocking the antibiotic shelf when my phone buzzed with a text from Meredith, "Paper served." He called his attorney. "Expect contact soon." I finished restocking. I checked a prescription for a woman picking up blood pressure medication. I explained to a confused teenager how to take birth control pills consistently. I did my job. I stayed calm. Scott called at 3:30. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 4. Again at 4:15. I did not answer. When my shift ended at 6, I checked the voicemail. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the anger underneath. Lila, what the hell is this? You filed for divorce? You froze our accounts? Call me back. We need to talk about this like adults. I deleted the message. I drove home. Scott's car was in the driveway. I parked on the street and texted Meredith, he's here. Should I go in? She responded immediately, it's your house. You have every right to be there. But if you feel unsafe, don't. Do you feel unsafe? I thought about the question. Scott had never been violent. He had never threatened me. He was a man who stole with spreadsheets, not fists. I did not think he would hurt me physically. Emotionally was a different question. I'll be fine, I texted back. I went inside. Scott was in the living room, pacing. He stopped when he saw me. You want to explain what the hell you're doing? He said. I set my bag down carefully. I took off my coat. I looked at him. I know about Jenna. I know about the account you've been transferring money into. I know about the trips. I know you've been planning to leave for months. His face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, denial, calculation. He landed on indignation. You've been spying on me? I've been paying attention, I said. There's a difference. This is insane, he said. You can't just freeze our accounts. That's my money too. It's our money, I said. Which is why you shouldn't have been stealing it. I wasn't stealing, he said. I was reallocating. We're married. It's not theft if it's marital assets. Tell that to the judge, I said. He stared at me. I saw the moment he realized I was serious, that I had documentation, that this was not something he could talk his way out of. His expression hardened. You're going to regret this, he said. You think you're going to come out ahead? You make $58,000 a year. I make $72,000. You think any lawyer is going to side with you when I'm the primary earner? I think any lawyer is going to side with me when they see the evidence of financial misconduct, I said. But we'll find out. He grabbed his keys from the table. I'm not staying here tonight. That's fine, I said. The locks will be changed tomorrow anyway. He slammed the door on his way out. I stood in the silent living room and listened to his car start, listened to him peel out of the driveway too fast, listened to the engine noise fade into the distance. Then I sat down on the couch and let myself feel it, the anger, the betrayal, the deep exhaustion of maintaining composure. I did not cry. I had learned a long time ago that crying was a release, and I did not want release yet. I wanted to stay sharp. I wanted to stay focused. Crying could come later, after this was finished. I texted Meredith, he knows. He left. I'm okay. She responded, good. Don't communicate with him except through me from now on. Anything he says to you directly could be used against you later. Let the lawyers handle it. I spent the night alone in the house. I ordered takeout. I watched a documentary about coral reefs. I went to bed early. I slept better than I had in months. The forensic accountant's report came back 3 weeks later. It confirmed what I already knew but in greater detail. Scott had been transferring money from our joint account for 8 months, not 5. The total was $22,000. He had also opened a credit card in both our names, without my knowledge or signature, which was fraud, and charged $11,000 to it. The charges were primarily for travel and dining, consistent with an affair. He had made minimum payments from the joint account, Payments I had not noticed because they were categorized as utilities in the transaction descriptions. The report also revealed something I had not known. Scott had taken out a personal loan for $15,000, listing our house as collateral. The loan was in his name only, but because the house was jointly owned, the lien affected us both. He had used the loan money to fund the secret account. Meredith filed an amended petition including the new findings. She requested that Scott be held solely responsible for the fraudulent credit card debt and a personal loan. She requested that he reimburse the joint account for the full $22,000 he had taken. She requested that I be awarded the house, with Scott's name removed from the deed, in exchange for assuming the mortgage solely. Scott's attorney countered. He claimed the transfers were legitimate expenses, that the credit card had been a joint decision I had simply forgotten about, that the personal loan was for home improvements that benefited us both. He provided no evidence for any of these claims. Meredith tore the arguments apart in her response. The case moved slowly, the way all legal cases do. Motions filed and responses drafted and hearings scheduled and postponed. I went to work. I filled prescriptions. I lived my life. Scott moved in with Jenna, wherever she lived. I did not ask, did not care. In March, Scott's attorney requested a settlement conference. Meredith said this was a good sign, it meant they knew they were losing and wanted to avoid a trial. We met in a conference room at the courthouse, a bland space with gray carpet and fluorescent lights. Scott sat across from me, Jenna beside him. It was the first time I had seen her. She was younger than me, maybe 30, with auburn hair and nervous energy. She would not meet my eyes. Scott's attorney opened with an offer. Scott would return $10,000 to the joint account, we would split the house equity 50-50, and we would each assume half of the credit card debt and the personal loan. It was insulting. Meredith said so. She countered, Scott would return the full $22,000, plus interest. He would assume full responsibility for the fraudulent credit card and the personal loan. I would keep the house and the mortgage. Scott would keep his retirement account, and I would keep mine. No alimony either direction. Scott's attorney said that was unreasonable. Meredith said it was generous considering she could pursue criminal fraud charges for the credit card. The room went quiet. Jenna looked at Scott. He looked at the table. We negotiated for 2 hours. In the end, we reached an agreement. Scott would return $18,000 to the joint account within 90 days. He would assume the credit card debt and the personal loan. I would keep the house. We would each keep our own retirement accounts and any separate property acquired before the marriage. The divorce would be finalized 60 days after the financial terms were satisfied. I signed. Scott signed. It was done. The $18,000 arrived in the joint account in early June, transferred in 3 installments. I withdrew my half, $9,000, and moved it into my personal account. I closed the joint account the same day. I refinanced the mortgage in my name only. I had the deed updated to remove Scott's name. I changed the locks, finally, though by then it felt more symbolic than necessary. The divorce decree arrived in the mail on July 10th. It was brief and bureaucratic, a document that ended 9 years of marriage in 3 pages of legal language. I read it once, filed it in a drawer, and did not look at it again. I took a week off work in August. I repainted the living room, a soft gray that felt calming and new. I replaced the couch, the one Scott and I had picked out together 7 years ago, with a new one I chose alone. I bought plants, a fiddle leaf fig for the corner, succulents for the windowsill. I reclaimed the space, made it mine. Vanessa, a colleague from the pharmacy, came over to help me hang curtains. She was one of the few people I had told about the divorce, and she had been quietly supportive throughout, never prying, always available if I needed to talk. As we worked, she asked how I was doing. Better, I said. I think I'm better. She nodded. You seem lighter. I thought about that. Lighter. Yes. Like I had been carrying something heavy for so long I had forgotten it was there, and now it was gone and I could move differently, breathe differently. I am, I said. That fall, I was promoted to pharmacy manager. It came with a salary increase and more responsibility, overseeing staff schedules, managing inventory, handling insurance disputes. I was good at it. I liked the structure, the problem solving, the way every day presented a new challenge that could be addressed with enough attention and effort. I also started teaching a community education class on medication safety. Once a month, I gave a 2-hour seminar at the public library, explaining how to read prescription labels, how to avoid dangerous drug interactions, how to talk to your doctor about side effects. The classes were free and open to anyone. They were usually full. People asked thoughtful questions. They thanked me afterward. I realized I had been missing teaching, the sense that I was sharing knowledge that could genuinely help people. In November, exactly 1 year after I had overheard Scott's phone call, I went to Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house. It was smaller this year, just my parents, my younger brother, and me. No in-laws, no performance, no tension. We ate turkey and mashed potatoes and talked about small things, my brother's new dog, my mother's book club, my father's plan to build raised garden beds in the spring. It was ordinary and comfortable and enough. My mother asked, carefully, if I was dating. I told her I was not, that I was not ready, that I was happy focusing on work and rebuilding my life. She nodded and did not push. My father said I seemed good, that I seemed like myself again. I realized he was right. I did feel like myself, maybe for the first time in years. In December, I received an unexpected email. It was from Jenna. The subject line said, "I'm sorry." I almost deleted it without reading. But curiosity won. I opened it. The email was short. "Lila, I know you have no reason to listen to me, but I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't know the full story when Scott and I started seeing each other. He told me you were separated, that the marriage was already over. I didn't know about the money he was taking, or the credit card, or any of it. When the truth came out, I felt sick. I ended things with him in April. I know that doesn't undo the harm, but I wanted you to know I'm not with him anymore. I hope you're doing well. You deserve better than how he treated you. Jenna." I read it twice. I thought about responding. I thought about what I would say, that her apology did not change anything, that she had still participated in the betrayal even if she had not understood its full scope, that I did not need her guilt or her reassurance. But I also thought about how much energy it would take to craft that response, and whether it would accomplish anything. In the end, I did not reply. I archived the email and moved on. Winter settled into Fargo the way it always did, early, cold, unrelenting. I worked through the holidays, covering shifts for colleagues who had families to visit. I did not mind. The pharmacy was quiet in a way I found soothing. People came in with their prescriptions, their insurance cards, their questions. I helped them. I sent them home with medications that would ease pain or lower blood pressure or fight infection. The work was concrete. The outcomes were measurable. I appreciated that. In January, I did something I had been thinking about for months. I hired a financial advisor. Her name was Ruth Callahan, and she came highly recommended by one of the pharmacy's regular patients. I met with her in her office, a small space in a professional building near downtown. I brought all my financial documents, bank statements, retirement account summaries, the investment account from my grandmother's trust. Ruth reviewed everything methodically. Then she looked at me and said, "You're in better shape than most people your age. You have minimal debt, a solid retirement account, and a significant cash cushion. What are your goals?" I thought about the question. "Security," I said. "I want to know I'll be okay no matter what happens." She nodded. "That's achievable. Let me put together a plan." Over the next several weeks, Ruth helped me restructure my finances. We maxed out my retirement contributions. We set up automatic transfers into a high-yield savings account for emergencies. We invested a portion of my grandmother's money in a diversified portfolio designed for long-term growth. We created a budget that accounted for everything: mortgage, utilities, groceries, the occasional dinner out, the vacation I was planning for next summer. For the first time in my life, I understood exactly where my money was, where it was going, and what it was doing for me. The clarity was intoxicating. I realized how much anxiety I had been carrying about finances, how much of my energy had gone into worrying about things I did not fully understand. Now I understood. Now I had a plan. In February, I ran into Scott. It was inevitable in a city the size of Fargo, only 125,000 people, one downtown, a limited number of grocery stores and coffee shops. I was picking up prescriptions at a competing pharmacy. I never filled my own at the store where I worked, and he was in line behind me. I did not realize it until I turned around and nearly walked into him. "Lila," he said. He looked tired. Older. His hairline had receded slightly, or maybe I just had not noticed before. "Scott," I said. There was an awkward pause. He shifted his weight. "How are you?" "I'm fine," I said. "You?" "Fine," he said. "Good." "I'm good." Another pause. I could see him trying to decide whether to say more, whether to apologize or explain or justify. I did not give him the opening. I nodded politely and walked past him, out into the cold February air. My hands were shaking slightly when I got to my car, but not from fear or anger. From adrenaline, from the simple fact of encountering him and realizing I felt nothing. No rage, no longing, no curiosity about his life. He was a stranger. Someone I used to know. I drove home and made dinner and did not think about him again. Spring came slowly, the way it always did in North Dakota. The snow melted in reluctant patches. The temperature climbed grudgingly into the 40s, then the 50s. I planted the garden again: tomatoes, peppers, the inevitable zucchini. I worked in the yard on weekends, pulling weeds, trimming bushes, repairing the fence that had sagged over the winter. In May, I took the vacation I had been planning, a week in Colorado, hiking in Rocky Mountain National Park. I went alone. I stayed in a small cabin near Estes Park, woke up early every morning, and hiked until my legs ached. I saw elk and marmots and wildflowers I could not name. I stood on a ridge at 10,000 feet and looked out at mountains that made me feel small in a way that was freeing instead of frightening. One evening, sitting on the cabin's porch with a glass of wine, I thought about how far I had come in 18 months. From the woman standing in the garage, listening to her husband plot her betrayal, to this, solvent, independent, at peace. The journey had not been easy. There had been nights I cried, mornings I did not want to get out of bed, moments I questioned whether I was strong enough to do this alone. But I had done it. I was doing it. When I returned to Fargo, I felt renewed. I threw myself into work with fresh energy. I mentored a new pharmacist who had just joined our staff, a recent graduate named Colin who was bright and earnest and slightly overwhelmed. I remembered being that overwhelmed, that uncertain. I told him it would get easier. I told him to ask questions, to double-check everything, to trust his training. He listened. He improved. I was proud of him. In July, I attended a continuing education conference in Minneapolis. It was a 3-day event focused on new developments in pharmacology, emerging medications, updated treatment protocols, innovations in patient counseling. I took notes, asked questions, networked with colleagues from across the region. On the second evening, there was a reception. I almost skipped it. I am not naturally social, and the idea of small talk with strangers exhausted me. But Vanessa, who had also come to the conference, convinced me to go. We got dressed up, went downstairs to the hotel ballroom, accepted glasses of wine from the catering staff. I was standing near the windows, half listening to a conversation about insulin delivery systems, when a man approached me. He was maybe 40, with graying hair and an easy smile. He introduced himself as David Reese, a pharmacist from Duluth. "You asked a great question in the diabetes management session this morning," he said. About dosage adjustments for patients with renal impairment. I've been dealing with that exact issue with one of my patients. We talked for 20 minutes, about the conference, about our respective practices, about the challenges of keeping up with new research while managing day-to-day responsibilities. He was smart and funny and did not take himself too seriously. When the reception ended, he asked if I wanted to get coffee the next morning before the session started. I said yes. We had coffee. We talked more. He told me about his work, about the independent pharmacy he had opened 5 years ago, about his 2 teenage daughters from a previous marriage. I told him about my work, about the community education classes I taught, about my recent promotion. I did not tell him about Scott, about the divorce, about any of it. It felt good to be just myself, not defined by what I had survived. At the end of the conference, David asked for my number. I gave it to him. He texted me 2 days later, asking if I would be interested in meeting up sometime. Duluth was only 4 hours from Fargo, an easy drive. I said I would think about it. I meant it. I thought about it for a week. I thought about whether I was ready to date, whether I wanted to open myself up to the possibility of being hurt again, whether the risk was worth the potential reward. I thought about how good it had felt to talk to someone who did not know my history, who saw me as I was now rather than as I had been. I texted David back, I'd like that. We met in Fargo in early August. He drove down on a Saturday. We had lunch at a small bistro downtown, then walked along the Red River, talking easily about everything and nothing. He was kind. He listened. He did not try to impress me or dominate the conversation. At the end of the afternoon, he asked if he could see me again. I said yes. We dated slowly, carefully. He came to Fargo twice a month, or I drove to Duluth. We had dinner, went to movies, walked around farmers markets. We texted regularly but not obsessively. We talked on the phone on Sunday evenings, long conversations about our weeks, about our work, about books we were reading and podcasts we were listening to. He met Vanessa in September. The 3 of us had dinner together, and afterward Vanessa told me she approved. He's steady, she said. That's good for you. I met his daughters in October. They were 15 and 17, polite and slightly wary. I did not try to win them over or force a relationship. I was simply myself. Over time, they warmed up. The younger one, Chloe, started texting me occasionally, questions about a science project, recommendations for books, random thoughts about her day. I liked her. I liked both of them. David asked me, in November, if I wanted to spend Thanksgiving together. His daughters would be with their mother, and he did not want to be alone. I had been planning to go to my parents' house, but I asked if he wanted to come with me. He said yes. Thanksgiving with David and my family was easy. He helped my father set up the extra table. He talked to my brother about college football. He complimented my mother's pie. My parents liked him. After dinner, my mother pulled me aside and said, "He's good for you. You seem happy." I realized she was right. I was happy. Not in the oblivious, unexamined way I had been happy early in my marriage to Scott. But in a deeper, more durable way. Happy because I knew myself better now. Happy because I had built a life I was proud of. Happy because I had learned I could survive loss and come out stronger. In December, David and I had our first real disagreement. It was about something minor, where to spend New Year's Eve, but it escalated into a larger conversation about expectations and communication. I felt myself starting to shut down, to retreat into the defensive patterns I had learned with Scott. But David did not let me. He said, "I'm not attacking you. I just want to understand what you need." We talked it through. We found a compromise. We moved on. It was the first time I realized that conflict did not have to mean the end of something, that disagreement could be navigated if both people were willing to listen. I told him about Scott in January. We were at his house in Duluth, sitting on his couch after dinner. I had not planned to tell him, but the conversation turned to past relationships, and it felt dishonest not to. I gave him the broad strokes: the affair, the financial theft, the divorce. I did not go into detail. I did not need to. David listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "That sounds really hard. I'm sorry you went through that." "I'm okay now," I said. "I can see that," he said. "But it's still okay to acknowledge it was hard." I thought about that. He was right. I had been so focused on moving forward, on proving I was fine, that I had not let myself admit how much it had hurt. I let myself say it out loud: "It was hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "You did it, though," he said. "You're here." "I'm here," I agreed. We kept dating. We kept building something steady and real. In March, he asked if I wanted to take a trip together, a long weekend somewhere warm, just the two of us. I said yes. We went to Arizona, stayed in a small resort outside Sedona, hiked Red Rock canyons and watched sunsets that looked like paintings. It was the first trip I had taken with someone in years, the first time I had trusted someone enough to be vulnerable in that way. On the last night, sitting on the balcony of our room, David said, "I'm falling in love with you. I wanted you to know." I looked at him. I thought about love, about what it meant, about how it was different now than it had been when I was younger. Love was not just the thrill of attraction or the comfort of companionship. Love was showing up. Love was listening. Love was staying steady when things got hard. "I'm falling in love with you too," I said. We flew home the next day. Life continued: work, family, the rhythms of daily existence. But something had shifted. I was no longer just surviving. I was building. I was choosing. I was happy. In May, 2 years after the divorce was finalized, I received an unexpected letter. It was from Scott's attorney, forwarding a message Scott wanted me to have. The attorney's note said Scott had waived privilege and asked that this be sent directly. The letter from Scott was handwritten, 2 pages on lined notebook paper. It said, "Lila, I know I have no right to contact you, and I understand if you don't read this. But I wanted to say I'm sorry. I was selfish and cruel, and you deserved so much better. I've spent the last 2 years thinking about the choices I made and the person I was, and I'm ashamed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I see now what I did, and I regret it. I heard through mutual friends that you're doing well, and I'm glad. You always deserve to be happy. I hope you are. Scott." I read the letter twice. I thought about whether it changed anything. It did not. An apology, even a sincere one, could not undo harm. But it was something. Acknowledgement. Accountability. A closing of a circle. I did not respond. I filed the letter in the same drawer as the divorce decree and moved on. That summer, I made a decision I had been considering for months. I applied to a graduate program in public health, focused on medication safety and health policy. I had been thinking about expanding my impact beyond the individual patients I saw every day, about working on systemic issues that affected thousands or millions of people. The program was part-time, designed for working professionals, and the classes were mostly online with occasional weekend intensives. I was accepted in July. I started classes in August. The work was challenging in a way I had not experienced since pharmacy school: dense readings, complex case studies, papers that required me to think critically about systems and structures. I loved it. I felt my brain stretching, growing, adapting to new ways of thinking. David was supportive. He asked about my classes, read drafts of my papers, celebrated when I got a good grade on an exam. He understood what it meant to pursue something that mattered to you, to invest in your own growth. In September, David's daughters asked if I wanted to come to Chloe's soccer game. I went. I sat in the bleachers with David and cheered when Chloe scored a goal. Afterward, we all went out for pizza. It felt natural, easy, like family. In October, David asked if I had thought about the future, our future. I said I had. He asked what I wanted. I told him I wanted what we had, but more of it. I wanted to see him more than twice a month. I wanted to build a life together, not just carve out time in our separate lives. We talked about logistics. His pharmacy was in Duluth, mine in Fargo. His daughters were in Duluth, settled in school and routines. I had my house, my job, my community education classes. Neither of us wanted to uproot completely. But we both wanted this to work. We decided to try something unconventional. We would keep our separate homes for now, but spend longer stretches of time together, full weekends, occasional full weeks when schedules allowed. We would revisit the arrangement in 6 months and see if we needed to adjust. It worked. I spent Thanksgiving week at his house. He spent Christmas week at mine. We fell into a rhythm that felt sustainable, that honored both our independence and our commitment to each other. In January, 3 years after I had overheard Scott's phone call, I was offered a new position, Director of Pharmacy Services for a regional hospital network that covered both Fargo and Duluth. The job would involve overseeing multiple pharmacy locations, developing standardized protocols, leading training programs. It would also involve significant travel between the two cities. I talked to David about it. He said, "This could be perfect for us. You'd be in Duluth half the time anyway." I accepted the job. I started in March. The work was demanding but fulfilling. I was making decisions that affected hundreds of patients, implementing policies that improved safety and efficiency, mentoring pharmacists across the network. I was using everything I had learned, the clinical knowledge, the management skills, the hard-won understanding of systems and how to change them. In May, David asked me to move in with him. Not to give up my house in Fargo, but to make Duluth my primary residence, to build our life together in one place. I thought about it for a week. I thought about the house in Fargo, the one I had fought for, the one that represented my independence and survival. I thought about what it would mean to leave. But I also thought about what I would be moving toward. A partner who respected me. A relationship built on honesty and communication. A future I was choosing, not one I was defaulting into. I said yes. I rented out the Fargo house to a young couple, a nurse and an engineer who reminded me of who I had been at their age, optimistic, hardworking, building something together. I moved most of my belongings to Duluth. I kept a few things in Fargo, a bedroom set, some kitchen items, so I would have a place to stay when work required me to be there overnight. David's daughters helped me unpack. Chloe claimed she was supervising, which mostly meant she sat on the couch offering unsolicited opinions about where I should put my books. The older daughter, Maya, was quieter, but she helped me hang pictures and organize the bathroom cabinets. At the end of the day, Maya said, "I'm glad you're here." It was the first time she had said anything like that. I told her I was glad to be there. I meant it. That summer, I finished my first year of graduate school. My GPA was 3.9. I was proud of that, not because the number mattered, but because it represented work I had done while also managing a demanding job and building a relationship and creating a life. I was capable of more than I had given myself credit for. In August, David and I took a trip to the north shore of Lake Superior. We stayed in a small cabin near Grand Marais, hiked the Superior hiking trail, kayaked in the cold clear water. One evening, sitting on a rocky beach watching the sunset, David asked me to marry him. I looked at him. I thought about marriage, about what it had meant the first time and what it could mean now. I thought about the difference between a partnership built on assumptions and one built on intentional choices. "Yes," I said. We got married in October, a small ceremony at a state park overlooking the lake. 40 people, our families, close friends, colleagues. Vanessa was my maid of honor. David's daughter stood beside him. My parents cried. It was simple and perfect and exactly what we wanted. I did not change my name. I had reclaimed it once already, after the divorce, and I wanted to keep it. David understood. He said he was marrying me, not my name. We honeymooned in Iceland, glaciers and waterfalls and geothermal pools. We hiked across black sand beaches and watched the northern lights dance across the sky. We talked about the future, about the life we were building, about what we wanted it to look like. We came home to Duluth in November. The house felt different now, not just David's house, but ours. We rearranged furniture to make space for both of us. We combined our book collections. We hung photos from the wedding on the walls. Life settled into a new rhythm. I worked, traveled between Fargo and Duluth, attended classes for my graduate program. David ran his pharmacy, spent time with his daughters, cooked dinner most nights because he was better at it than I was. We had disagreements, about money, about schedules, about whose turn it was to clean the bathroom. But we talked through them. We did not let them fester. In December, I finished my graduate program. I walked across a stage in Minneapolis and accepted my Master of Public Health degree. David and my parents were in the audience. Afterward, we went to dinner and celebrated. My father gave a toast to Lila, who has never given up on herself or the people she serves. I thought about that. Not giving up. It sounded simple, but it was the hardest work I had ever done. In January, I was approached by a National Pharmacy Association to serve on a task force developing guidelines for medication therapy management. It was unpaid, volunteer work, but it was significant. The guidelines would be adopted by hospitals and clinics across the country. I said yes. The work was intense. Monthly conference calls, quarterly in-person meetings, endless document reviews and revisions. But it was also meaningful. I was contributing to something larger than myself, something that would improve patient care on a massive scale. In March, I received an email from Jenna. It had been over a year since her last message, the apology I had never responded to. This one was different. The subject line said, "Thank you." The email said, "Lila, I know you never responded to my last message, and I don't blame you. But I wanted to tell you something. After everything that happened with Scott, I started therapy. I needed to understand why I made the choices I made, why I believed his lies, why I participated in something so harmful. It's been hard work, but it's helped. I'm in a healthier place now. I have a good job, good friends, a life I'm proud of. And I realized I owe part of that to you. Watching how you handled the divorce, with dignity and strength and without cruelty, showed me what it looks like to take the high road. You didn't owe me anything, but you gave me an example to follow. Thank you. I hope you're happy. You deserve it. Jenna." I read the email several times. I thought about responding, about telling her I was glad she was doing better, that I appreciated her honesty. In the end, I sent a brief reply, "Thank you for letting me know. I'm glad you're in a good place. Take care." It felt like enough. In April, I ran into Scott one last time. I was in Fargo for a work meeting, stopped at a coffee shop near the hospital, and he was there. He looked older, heavier, tired. He was with a woman I did not recognize, not Jenna, someone new. He saw me and hesitated, clearly debating whether to acknowledge me. I made the decision for him. I nodded, polite and distant, then turned back to my coffee. He did not approach. When I left, I saw him watching me through the window. I did not look back. That evening, I called David. I told him about seeing Scott, about how it had felt like nothing, not anger, not satisfaction, just nothing. David said, "That's how you know you've moved on. When they become irrelevant." He was right. In June, David and I bought a small cabin on a lake an hour north of Duluth. It was nothing fancy, one bedroom, a screened porch, a dock that needed repairs. But it was ours. We spent weekends there, swimming and kayaking and sitting on the porch reading. It became our retreat, the place we went when we needed to step away from the demands of work and life. In August, Maya left for college. Chloe started her senior year of high school. David struggled with the transition, his daughters growing up, becoming independent. I reminded him that this was the goal, that we raised children to leave us. He knew I was right, but it was still hard. In September, I was promoted again, this time to Vice President of Pharmacy Operations for the hospital network. It came with a significant salary increase and even more responsibility. I was overseeing 50 pharmacists now, making budget decisions, representing the network at state and national conferences. I thought about the woman I had been 5 years ago, standing in the garage, listening to her husband plot her betrayal. I thought about how small my world had felt then, how trapped I had been in a life that was not mine. I thought about everything I had built since, the career, the education, the relationship, the sense of self. I thought about the fact that Scott's cruelty had been the catalyst for all of it. Not the cause, but the moment that forced me to choose, stay small or grow. I had chosen growth. I was still choosing it. In October, Vanessa called to tell me she was pregnant. She and her husband had been trying for 2 years. She was 12 weeks along, cautiously optimistic. I congratulated her, told her I would be there for whatever she needed. She asked if I would consider being the baby's godmother. I said yes, honored. In November, David and I hosted Thanksgiving at our house. Both our families came, my parents, my brother, David's daughters, his ex-wife and her new partner. It was chaotic and loud and full of laughter. I looked around the table and felt something I had not felt in years, belonging. In December, I turned 40. David threw a surprise party, 50 people crammed into our house, decorations, a cake, toasts from friends and family. Vanessa gave a speech about how I was the most competent person she knew. My father said I was the strongest. David said I was the kindest. I stood in my living room, surrounded by people who loved me, and thought about how different my life was from what I had imagined at 30. I had thought I would have children by now, a settled marriage, a predictable future. I had none of those things. But I had something better, a life I had chosen, a partner I respected, work that mattered. I had survived betrayal and built something beautiful from the wreckage. I had learned that strength was not about never falling, but about getting back up. I had learned that happiness was not a destination but a practice, something you chose every day. I had learned that you could lose everything and still have enough. That night, after everyone had gone home and David and I were cleaning up, he asked me how I felt. Grateful, I said. I feel grateful. He smiled. Good. You should. We finished cleaning in comfortable silence. I washed dishes while he put away leftovers. We moved around each other easily, a dance we had learned over years of practice. Later, lying in bed, I thought about the question I had been asked so many times over the past 5 years: how did you do it? How did you survive? The answer was both simple and complicated. I survived because I had no choice, staying broken was not an option. I survived because I had resources, financial and emotional, that gave me options. I survived because I was stubborn, because I refused to let Scott's betrayal define the rest of my life. But mostly, I survived because I learned to trust myself. I learned that my instincts were valid, that my anger was justified, that my decisions were sound. I learned that I did not need anyone's permission to rebuild my life, that I did not need anyone's approval to choose happiness. I learned that the opposite of betrayal was not revenge. It was integrity. It was living according to your own values, making choices you could be proud of, building a life that reflected who you really were. I had done that. I was still doing it. The next morning, I woke early. David was still asleep. I made coffee and sat on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the sun rise over the lake. The water was calm, reflecting the pink and orange sky. The air was cold but not bitter. I thought about my daughter, the one I never had with Scott. I had grieved that loss, the future I had imagined that never materialized. But I had also made peace with it. My life did not include children, but it included mentorship, Colin at the pharmacy, the pharmacists I supervised, Chloe and Maya, Vanessa's baby when they arrived. I could shape lives without giving birth to them. I thought about the Emma Grace fund that never was, because that story belonged to someone else. But I thought about the work I did, the patients whose lives I improved, the policies I helped create that made healthcare safer and more accessible. I thought about legacy, about the ways we leave the world better than we found it. I thought about Scott, briefly. I wondered if he was happy, if he had learned anything, if he carried regret. Then I let the thought go. His life was no longer my concern. I thought about David, still sleeping upstairs. I thought about how love could be different the second time, less about passion and more about partnership, less about need and more about choice. I thought about how much I valued the life we were building together. I thought about myself. About the pharmacist who counted pills and counted money and noticed what did not add up. About the woman who documented everything, who stayed calm, who made strategic decisions instead of emotional ones. About the person I had become through loss and struggle and intentional growth. I thought about the wisdom I had earned, that you do not need to be perfect to be strong, that you do not need to have all the answers to move forward, that you do not need someone else to complete you. I thought about the fact that I was enough. That I had always been enough. The sun climbed higher. The sky shifted from pink to blue. David came out onto the porch, 2 mugs of fresh coffee in his hands. He handed me one and sat beside me. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything," I said. "Nothing. Just how good this is." He put his arm around me. We sat in silence, watching the light change on the water. I thought about sharing this story, about the people who might read it and recognize themselves, the women counting pills or balancing budgets or raising children, the women who suspect something is wrong but cannot quite name it, the women who are building the courage to leave or stay or demand better. I wanted to tell them, trust yourself. Document everything. Do not let anyone convince you that your instincts are wrong. Do not accept cruelty as normal. Do not shrink yourself to make someone else comfortable. I wanted to tell them, you are stronger than you think. You have more resources than you realize. You can survive what feels unsurvivable. I wanted to tell them, healing is possible. Happiness is possible. A life built on your own terms is possible. But mostly, I wanted to tell them, you are enough. You have always been enough. David squeezed my shoulder. "You know what I love about you?" he said. "What?" "You're the calmest person I know in a crisis. And you make really good coffee." I laughed. "Those are my 2 best qualities." "Among many," he said. We finished our coffee. We went inside. We started the day, work emails and breakfast and the ordinary tasks that make up a life. It was unremarkable and precious, the kind of day I had once taken for granted and now cherished. Because I had learned that happiness was not found in grand gestures or perfect circumstances. It was found in moments like this, a quiet morning, a good partner, work that mattered, a life built on choices instead of accidents. I had learned that you could lose almost everything and still find your way back to wholeness. That betrayal did not have to break you. That you could count pills and count money and count your blessings, and find that the numbers added up to enough. I was a pharmacist. I understood dosage and duration and the importance of following protocols. I had applied those same principles to my life, measured my responses, stayed consistent, trusted the process. And I had come through. Not unscathed, but whole. Not unchanged, but stronger. I looked around my house, at the life I had built, and felt something I had not felt in the early days after the betrayal: contentment. This was enough. I was enough. And that knowledge, hard-earned and permanent, was worth more than anything Scott could have taken from me.